Okay, so in ancient Mesopotamia, what did they believe about the shape of the Earth to be? And like, was it considered a globe? Was it flat? What would you say about that?
So, I mean, the short answer is they would have believed it to have been flat, but the longer answer is that I don't think they would have understood the question necessarily.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, as you know, we don't get cartographic, i.e., drawn depictions of the world until really late. The Babylonian map of the world is the first one we get, and it's around 700 BC at the earliest dating, arguably. So most of what we have is coming from texts that are talking about the orientation and landscape of the earth and the heavens from a really elite scribal expert perspective. So to what degree some of these reflected on what people actually thought about the layout of the world around them, if they did, is difficult to say.
Yeah.
There's certainly the idea of, these are the lands, and then insofar as we can tell, and this is particularly from things like the Babylonian map of the world, this sort of encircling sea. Yeah, so I mean, you can see clearly there's this, ring of water around the central area, and then these radiating triangles, like how I'm drawing it out with my hands, as if
That's
that
good.
helps, that are more mystical and mythical locations. So there's certainly the idea of something, that there is something beyond their own space. It's jumping a bit in time, but one of my favorite kind of depictions of this actually comes from Herodotus, obviously jumping quite a bit in time, but he talks about going into each of the cardinal directions, and he encounters people who live at the farthest edges, and everything they do is kind of strange and wondrous. And then he has this phrase he uses with different versions, and it's basically, and beyond that, there is nothing. Or there is, nothing is known, there is nothing present. And to some degree, we have that same idea that beyond the sea, where you would hit the edges, it's difficult to say what would happen. We see that Gilgamesh, in his wanderings, for example, he wanders to the horizon where he encounters, what do you want, cat? Encounters these twin peaks of Mount Mashu. Oh, this other feline the second trying to get in some screen time. But when he moves beyond the horizon and then encounters the jewel trees, and even then he travels across the sea and finally gets to the island of Dilmun, where the gods have placed Utnapishtim, and where immortality can also be found in this plant that he achieves and then loses. So even there, the idea of hitting the horizon, which should be a final boundary, but being able to go beyond it, suggests that the idea of a fixed border to the edges of the earth, is itself fairly fluid.
There are many different beliefs about the path to heaven today, but what was heaven in Mesopotamia? Was it another dimension? Was it a spiritual place? How did one get there? And I know that's a question full of baggage, and I apologize. I mean that physically. So, and do we have examples of that journey being taken in a textual tradition?
So I'm going to do this in a slightly out of order
Please do.
Approach. When you die in Mesopotamia, you go to the netherworld, and you eat and drink dust for all eternity. The netherworld is not that pleasant of a place for anyone. The idea is that if you're being given offerings of water or wine by your family, it's part of the importance of having a family and having a continuation of the line that will give you offerings, then you might drink water and eat dust for all eternity. But the idea of a positive vision of the afterlife as we think of it, something paradisiacal is not present in Mesopotamia, as you know. This idea that we get very much in Egypt, where there's the ability to get to an afterlife that contains, clean, i.e., sweet, which is to say non-salty, irrigable water and fields and pleasant lands for the rest of your eternal days is not so much in Mesopotamia. The closest we maybe get is this text in Gilgamesh and in the Netherworld, where he describes the Netherworld and all of the babies who have died, sit and eat, I think, honey and ghee. I'm remembering off the top of my head for all eternity. And outside of that, it's kind of unpleasant for everyone. So there is a heaven, or the heavens, as sometimes it's plural, but it's where the gods live, and it's not a home for people. So the heavens themselves are described in different ways. They're certainly, because they're located, the word being on, or the sky, they're located above, literally in the sky. So to get to them, well, we have two examples of this happening, right? In Adapa, which is a text that we have first. Actually, I think our earliest copies of it are from Amarna, around the, say, 14th, 15th centuries, BC, as ever. There, Adapa is out fishing in his boat, and he speaks because the wind is blowing, and he gets angry about this. And in his speech, he breaks the wing of the wind, and his speech has actual force. I like the word effective. It's actually from a book by Ursula K. Le Guin, The Lathe of Heaven, about the idea of effective dreaming. The character has dreams which then become real. So because he has this power of effective speech, of incantations, that is to say, the gods take him up to heaven, but Enki has warned him. So Enki/Ea, the trickster god, the god of magic, has warned him to not eat or drink anything in the heavens when he's there. And we have this brief interlude of Adapa to the heavens, but then he doesn't drink or eat this material, this food and drink that would give him presumably immortality, and he's returned to Earth. And there's debate about whether or not Enki was playing a trick on Adapa. I'm more fond of the idea, and this is something actually that I first heard from my advisor, Piotr Mikołowski, in graduate school, that Enki was keeping the ability of incantations on Earth. Because what we see with Utnapishtim, who is made immortal, is that he's placed in Dilmun, in Bahrain. He's beyond the horizon. So to have immortality is to be moved away from the place where humans actually live, and it's to be really put off the playing field. The other ascent to heaven is, of course, what we have with Etana, where he gets carried on the back of this eel through the layers of heaven. And here we have this idea of lower, middle, and upper heavens, which is something we also get in these, very scholarly, mystical, and explanatory texts, something that Livingston has edited in, I think it's State Archives of Assyria 3, all of which are online. State Archives of Assyria online, so you too can read them without...
Assyriologists were very generous people. That's what
Yeah. So here, of course, Etana, visits the high heaven of Anu, which is the highest level of heaven, and he enters through a series of gates, I think 2, associated with different deities. So there is this idea that the highest level of heaven is not only connected to Anu, but also almost like a temple complex. One of these texts, and this actually is a text that Horowitz edits in his book, KAR 307, is one of these very scholarly texts that looks at the levels of heaven as having different stones, which I find really cool. That the upper level is it Lulu Danitu, and then the one below that. Yeah, I don't remember the middle one, but the middle heaven has the god Marduk in a sanctuary made of lapis, and the lowest is made of jasper, and that belongs to the stars. So there is this idea of the movements of the stars being set throughout the lowest level of heaven. But again, that's where the gods live, that's where the stars live, the constellations that they set in fixed patterns. So you don't go there unless you're a witch, and then you get burned after you're killed. Well, after the demonic, chaotic, primeval you is killed, you are burned so that your spirit is forced to the heavens for the gods to deal with. So maybe not the best way to get to heaven.
Yes, and it's rarely a good thing to go there, is what.
Yes. I was rereading Etana recently, and I'd forgotten his trip back down is kind of wild because the eagle is just, we're flying, and it just boots him off his back and catches him like when he's almost at the next level, and he does it again, and then he catches him a meter down above the ground. It's probably one of the earliest abusive relationships in literary text that you could see. Like, oh, you're afraid of heights? Oh, okay, cool. And he spends months helping the eagle because it's trapped in a pit, and then the eagle takes him to heaven, and then on the way down is just like, hey, would it be fun if you got to experience free fall for innumerable stretches of terror before I caught you again?